Of today at the Great Moscow Urban Forum. We're going to discuss the topic which is becoming a new bug, this really significant in Moscow and Russia, and this is education of people in developing a city. Planning, projecting, cultural development, when, how, at what moment we need to involve people and how. Or maybe we shouldn't involve people a lot at all, or we shouldn't do it at all. So let me name our speakers: Milena Ivkovic, member of the board of directors ISOCAP; Manfred Kühne, head of the Berlin State Urban Development Department; Klaus Vermeyer, managing partner Urban Catalyst GmbH; Alexander Nenko, head of Quality of Urban Life Laboratory, co-founder RTC; and Nadezhda Snegiryova, architect partner of the project Bureau 8. As I've said already, we are going to discuss rather practical than theoretical issues, which is most relevant to us. So we need to realize how it happens in other countries. Participating, collaborative construction, maybe, and do we have successful or not successful practices here in this country? So masterclass is the format of our discussion. So you're welcome. With your questions, comments, we'll have every opportunity to ask questions to our greatest experts. And now I would like to give the floor to the chief of the Berlin Senate Urban Development Department, Mr. Kühne. You work in Berlin, which is one of the most cultural cities and involving more and more citizens. Could you please share your experience with us? In your work of 40 years, maybe you had success or mistakes.
Can be understood. Thank you very much for your presentation. I want to give you an insight in our everyday work in urban planning in the context of an experience of 40 years of participation. So I want to show some examples of projects in Berlin, but also I want to give a background about the development of our participation culture. Maybe I can, yes. To give you some figures, Berlin is a city of 3.7 million inhabitants. We have 12 boroughs. That's very important because our administration system is very decentralized, and the boroughs in many cases are the leaders of urban development processes, and so the cooperation between the civil society in the local districts and our administration is a major issue in Berlin. You will know Berlin is a city of very disruptive development. Since World War I, every decade brought profound changes in the city. And this history of disruption and conflicts connected to them is one of the reasons why participation and involvement of the civil society is so important in Berlin. We are a very strange city in the German context and also in the international context, because in Berlin, we don't have a powerful political government. Berlin, I mentioned it, Germany is a very decentralized country, and it's the task of the municipalities to steer the development of the cities. And Angela Merkel, for example, our federal chancellor, has almost no influence in the development of the capital. On the other hand, we don't have a very strong private sector. When the Soviet army freed Berlin in 1945, German elites left the city and moved to the future American and British occupation zones. And even today, big companies in Germany are not anymore situated in Berlin, but they are in Munich, in Stuttgart, in Frankfurt, and other cities. So for us, it's not everyday task to cooperate with big companies. That is just starting recently. And as a result, it's civil society that is dominating the development discussions, and civil society is producing continuously new issues and new activists to promote innovative approaches of city development. Our most recent challenge is the first real economic boom in Berlin since the 1920s. And for the first time since the 1920s, this boom is a demographic boom and an economic boom. In a few years, Berlin changed its position from the metropolitan region in Germany with the highest unemployment rate to the metropolitan region with the highest job increase. And we were completely unprepared. That's why rallying against a big private investment and against gentrification is the most relevant background for today activities in participation. But I want to come back to the development of the participation culture in Berlin. 40 years ago, there were the first initiatives who fought against the construction of a highway intersection on a former railway site. And this was the beginning of the ecological movement in big cities in Germany. And since that time, we experienced a continuous history of conflicts and reconciliation and negotiation of urban development processes. Today, this former railway site is one of the most vital inner city parks. And so for everybody, it is obvious that it was the initiative of local people that made possible in the long run the creation of such vital green space in the heart of the city. Another background for our participation tradition were squatting movements in the 1970s and 1980s in West Berlin, and a squatting movement after the wall came down 1989 in former East Berlin. The background was that the city governments had bought major parts of the existing housing stock in order to demolish them. And my generation as students in West Berlin started to squat these empty buildings and to fight successfully for refurbishment and the conservation of this housing stock. And today, everybody in Berlin is happy if he or she has the chance to live in such quarters, in such areas in the inner city. In the late 1990s, the legal basis for participation was strengthened even more. Since that time, it's very easy to organize a referendum in Berlin. You can organize a referendum on the local level and on the entire city level. And most top-down projects of our administration, for example, here, the development of the former Tempelhof airport site is connected to a referendum. And in many, many cases, the electorate in Berlin, the civil society, says no to our projects, then we have to start to renegotiate these projects. And so we learned that it is, at least in Berlin, no good idea to start with an overdetermined top-down project, but to involve civil society and local activists from the beginning. Another important aspect of the recent economical development was the experience that in very central inner city brownfields, in a phase of 20 years of economical and statistical stagnation, young people from everywhere in Europe came and developed Berlin's vibrant club and cultural scene. And these areas of stagnation of private investment were the breeding places of the new startup communities and the breeding places of today's economical recovery of Berlin. In this area and in this context, a new type of investment emerged. Local activists found out how to develop their own design strategies and their own funding strategies. And today, we very often have the alternative to involve international or national investors in urban development projects, or to cooperate with local activists who have the knowledge to develop extremely interesting and innovative approaches. And most recent project in Berlin was also initiated by the civil society. This is the historic central island of Berlin with the Museums Island, and there were activists that proposed to transform one of the branches of the river in Berlin into open-air swimming area. The basis is an innovative cleaning system in the water, and now we started to cooperate with this activists, and today we have even funding from the national government to find out if that's a relevant solution for the cleaning and the appropriation of inner city water bodies in big cities. The most complicated field of planning and cooperation was the former historic center of Berlin that was transformed in the 1970s as the center, the monumental center of socialist East Berlin. Today, we have a lot of buildings to develop there because there was never an agreement in the political field how to deal with this heritage. And that's our recent area of experiments in former administration buildings of the GDR government. Now we are trying to bring together city-owned development companies and activists from the local experimental scene. The most ambitious participation process was the programming for competition for the redevelopment of the central esplanade in Berlin, because there was a big conflict. Many conservative people from the West wanted to reconstruct the lost historic quarters there, and the people in the East wanted to develop the socialist heritage. And we discussed that in public for a year. It was a very intensive discussion, and as a result, we finished with 10 guidelines elaborated by civil society, and that will be the guideline for the future development of this area. Today we even dare to think about the development of very huge structures like former Tempelhof Airport in participation processes, but that's a scale that is not common for us, and there we have to experiment, and we don't know already if that can be a success to start such ambitious projects with a very great involvement of the civil society in Berlin. But discussing with the people on the local level and on the municipal level, that's our everyday job. And so participation is one of the major tasks of our administration today. Thank you very much.
Спасибо большое, господин Кюне.
Many thanks, Mr. Kuhne. So very interesting. While I was listening to your presentation, at the moment we are working very closely with 58 cities in Russia as part of 100 urban leaders in the country. Yes, and I loved the experience of Berlin. So we have project with them. Upgrading riversides and downtowns, and thank you for such a systemic view from the representatives of a city administration. Yeah, it's very exciting to also hear to what customers of design project say, and I would like to hand it over to Mr. Overmeyer, who uses the spatial planning in their work. So how you manage to integrate your residents in the urban planning processes. So could you please keep to the agenda of like 10 minutes speech?
My name is Klaus Overmeyer. I'm a skilled gardener. I like gardening. And I think gardening has to do a lot with the city. And I started my enterprise from an international research project called Urban Catalyst on the potential of temporary use for urban residual areas. And when I finished my studies at the end of the 90s, there was no work for landscape architects and architects in Berlin. The city was bankrupt, but as Manfred Kühne said, it was very attractive for many young people. And in our research, we found out how these activists have an impact on urban development and how urbanism can benefit from a user-based urbanism. I brought you some slides on the tools we work with in our office, but I first want to start with some general aspects on participatory planning. What we witness in a lot of European cities is that citizens, that they reclaim the city, that they reclaim the right for the city, and that they want to have an impact on urban planning. What is also very crucial about this time is that we have a close link between macro and microcosm. So on the one hand, we have the citizens living in their neighborhood. They want to have an impact on how their living environment looks like. And on the other hand, we are very strongly affected by global challenges like climate change, mobility, migration, social injustice. And I think people feel that in future that there will be a close link between these two levels. And you see that the cities and regions, the metropolitan areas, they have a strong role in this tension field between these two poles. They have to intermediate and they have to implement the urban agendas on the local scale. So if we have a closer look at the main driving forces for spatial development, we have a strong experience how what we did. And a lot of planning is still based on extrapolating of the past. On the other hand, we have the actors and an increasing number of initiatives who influences urban development processes. Then we are there as planners with our own ideals, and we want to shape the city as we do. And on the other hand, we have a strong counterwind of the great transformation. So all these global aspects, they force us to change our policies. And then we have, I think, also a change concerning the borders and the boundaries between market, state, and civic society. So these boundaries are increasingly vanishing, and there's a new space, and there are many new types of actors who enter this space between market, state, and civic society. So you have activists, you have poor administrations with a lot of contacts, you have innovative developers, or you have people who have a role as agents. And I think these new types of actors, they form the breeding ground for new modes of participation. They are self-organized, very qualified, empowered, capable of doing do-it-yourself projects and not only saying or telling their own opinion. What is very interesting about our planning procedures is that we in former times were used to communicate the results of planning to a broader public, and it was more kind of information policy. And nowadays, at least in Berlin, you do not start with plans but with people, and the people, they claim their own idea of the city, and the planning has to react on these ideas, or at least we have to design processes who integrate public ideas into planning. So what is important in this field is that we learn to use new methods and tools to integrate these fields of participation and planning. One of the most crucial tools at the beginning of a process is the process design. And it's like the design of a neighborhood or of a building. It's a creative process, and within this design you define milestones, you define different modes of interaction between planning and public dialogue. And within this design process you also have to make sure who decides and what are the results of the process, what are the main goals. Within Catalyst we have developed a lot of different formats to foster participatory planning, and we integrate these tools in these design processes. One important thing is that we link the debate to the site. And often we create a kind of extraordinary condition on the site. So we stop a parking lot or enter a building, and we open a space for debates. So if you link the debate to the site, you will be successful in generating new perspectives. What is also crucial that a lot of initiatives, activists, but also people in the city, that they have an enormous knowledge on the city and on current topics of urban development. So people know about floods, about climate change, about affordable housing or urban manufacturing, about new values in urban development. And I think we have to try to use this knowledge as a resource for our planning. What is also a very popular tool is that we do safaris, or that that we try to explore the site with the people, and we also try to test the site, so to create temporary spaces where people feel comfortable and where they meet and where they discuss on the future of the site. I think it's also important to make these different ideas visible and to give them into the planning process. So what we do is that we map the ideas of the people, and that we give these mappings to the planners, and they have to integrate them into their planning. We also build ideas one by one with people so they can test the site. This is, for example, a very common tool in public spaces. And the advantage is that one also can take risks because it's only a temporary intervention, and one can withdraw from this intervention again, or one can also build it for a longer time. In our processes, we combine ideas of people with planning concepts. So this is a process in Cologne for 120 hectare big area. And we organized a big idea market where different initiatives showed their ideas for a park, for housing models, for new mobility concepts. And this idea market was combined with a presentation of the planning teams. And we asked the planning teams not to present a slideshow, but to build their ideas in a big model so that everybody could understand the basic scaffold and the basic idea. And by the matching of the public ideas and the planning ideas, a new debate was launched, and within the next presentations one could see how the teams embedded the ideas of the people in their planning. And I think within participatory planning it's very important that people realize how a plan comes into being and how a city evolves. And I think we have to get rid of these ready-to-go and final concepts. This is a project we did with Manfred Kühne together at Checkpoint Charlie in Berlin. And we also the public debate with planning strategies. And I think it's important to visualize the different conflicts and the outcomes of the dialogue. Okay, last slide. Some recommendations for the future: involve people and different stakeholders, communicate transparently and with a low threshold, different formats for different questions, test one-to-one and have fun, and allow flexible processes. Thank you very much.
Спасибо большое. Спасибо большое.
Thank you so very much for this exciting presentation. And now I would like to move to the sunny St. Petersburg, and I would like to give the floor to Alexander Nenko, the co-founder of Art4City. Alexander, cultural technologies you use in St. Petersburg and outside of this city, how they work, and what issues, what challenges do you face, and maybe you have some successful cases by now. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. And I would like to share with you the experience of our Art4City team. We try to reprogram the city and create a new request for participation via cultural formats. And this is a summary slide. You can see what we do. we use different forms based on cultural icons and symbols, different formats of interaction to create this new subjectivity. Without such involvement, yes, it would be hard to get people to participate. So city festivals, workshops, so they are all addressed to different types of community. And we can develop a contest where people can participate and demonstrate their new attitude to the city. The activities, the events can have different shapes and forms, like community holidays are addressed to neighbors. Yeah, we talk about a good neighborhood spirit, but people don't actually know their neighbors. So we actually want to ask the question, who are my neighbors and can I be a good neighbor? So this city game is a different. So this entire city is a playground. So we don't see our city as something stable, but rather as something dynamic you can discover and rediscover. So the city game allows a person to learn more about the city. Urban festivals are full-scale events that influence the entire city rather than a single community. So it influences all our residents and allow them to feel themselves citizens rather than consumers. And in terms of philosophy or ideology, why this cultural programming work? In fact, we live in a routine mode. So we live an everyday life. We clearly understand how many hours per day we work, where is our job place, what we do after job is over. And we get accustomed to the city and our role in the city as an employee, a mother, or a commuter. When we create an event, so this is a chance to break the routine and shape in one point of time and location a new format for interaction or assume a new role, or we can try to describe differently what we see around us. For instance, talking about this community holiday, so we reconstruct a new role, that of neighbor, a new format inside this community holiday, interaction between neighbors. So when people can cook together, when we can gather around one table and we share one cooking pan, and this results in a new perception of each other, and we talk about each other as about neighbors or residents of a yard or a community, and we create a new description. So events allow us to disrupt the routine and change our perception of the city. Events and activities are no silver bullet, but they can accumulate. We need a series of the events to pursue our goal. We need to tell again and again about our needs, about what we want to do. We need to describe ourselves as residents of the city who would like to be in the center of developing new social spaces. So when cultural events repeat, they result in effect when you have links between new language, new interaction modes, so they become stable. we end up with shaping an ecosystem of a different civil order. So this is philosophy. And I would like to show to you a couple of cases we work with. And these cases are very typical for St. Petersburg. Both of them are about city festivals. So live streets. Live streets and Genius Lotse. Genius Lotse is a local festival dedicated to a certain public space. And urban festivals for St. Petersburg and for other Russian cities can be called one of the breakthrough form of participation and shaping the request for participation. So it's about shaping and understanding that new roles are possible. Live streets. So this is a festival celebrated several times in St. Petersburg, always in central location. And the ideology of the festival, of the format, sends us back to the understanding of streets being more than just therapeutes or pavements we used to move from point A to point B, but that city is a space for social interaction. So streets are filled with people. They are spaces which should be won back by humans, not as a transit point, but as an action point.
The living streets are in tune with the formats which were tried abroad. Live streets, narrow streets have shown themselves being very good part of culture. In St. Pete, we work in accordance with a very interesting principle. One of the most important features of live streets is the whole chain of organization, which allows to include the festival launch by different stakeholders. So they sometimes do not know yet they are stakeholders of the street or of the process, but they get included. So things start with the organizational committee, freedom team, and some other creative young people. I don't know, there are mostly young people. This is a so-called open organizing committee. It is precious because everyone can come here if he or she wants to be responsible for something, if this person voluntarily wants to undergo the education course of half a year of participating in this festival. So besides the organizing committee, there is the whole interaction complex and process. There is the local business which is there. There are creative professionals and people responsible for workshops, festivals, which are ready mostly for free to be enrolled in the process of the festival. But this is also the inclusive process of the citizens, first and foremost of those who live around the place where the festival is launched and during the festival. Other people are involved, many thousands of them. This is the process which starts by 10, 15 people, which make the open organizing committee, and up to 10 to 15,000 of people who really take part in the festival. So this is not an ordinary festival on consumption. We are traditionally goods are sold, so there are a lot of creative areas and workshops which are aimed at collaboration and creation. Another issue, time and place, we launched last year as part of the Week of Germany. Last year that was in Participatory. It is a new social space in St. Petersburg, but quite popular today. When we started working there, it was quite empty. I mean, there were no facilities highlighting the unique features and atmosphere of this area. Sivkabel is the name of the port on the Isle of Krestovsky. So what else do? We educate young specialists. We've involved more than 60 professionals, young architects, designers, and sociologists, and all of them were trained. And then they searched the territory and they worked on the local facilities launching. So that was the real involvement of people. I mean, young people really participated in the change of the social space they visit. In this project, Time and Place, we work out the algorithm of planning. Time and place is an event. It is temporary, but the planning is rather strategic and long-term. So we start with searching, then we generate the ideas, then we select the ideas, and we make the prototype as an installation. We try it, we test it in the context, and then we select whether this installation should be part of this context or not. So these two forms represent the event-based approach, but with a strategic view for the recall. For the social space, for collaboration, for the new role and new identity. There is one thing especially important for St. Petersburg, and this is collaboration from the expert community. These are the people which are trained here and are ready to work more locally. I mean, these events are forming this class of active citizens with initiative who are ready to go on working and setting up more horizontal connections, I should say. Thank you so much, Alexandra. The technology Alexandra is sharing with us works not only in St. Pete, which is a great city, but we've tried it also in a small town of 14,000 people. I mean, what we did was kind of a vaccination for the local community, so that this is possible, and more people now are involved in the local point. Projecting in collaboration, maybe not everywhere. You know, when we started working with the nuclear cities, so-called, it was most difficult to involve people in this co-creation because historically these cities and towns are more conservative, but our team, this team, managed to do it in 5 towns already, so this technology works, and I would like to give the floor to the next speaker, Ms. Milena Ivkovic. So we're going now transferring to the digital epoch. How today different technologies are gamification, how do they help to involve more and more people? Or maybe they prevent to involve them offline and transfer them to more online status?
Inviting me. This is a really extremely important topic, something that I've been doing for the last 10 years in the Netherlands, but also internationally. So it's participation is really a huge issue. The question about the digital approaches, that's something that really fascinates me because, you know, from the examples that we saw, the biggest proportion of public participation in planning is actually a good communication trajectory. To be able to motivate people to come to a certain event, try a certain tool or just to be part of the larger discussion and even be a part of activism against something. In times when everyone has a mobile phone, I think it can be even more speed up. There is still some kind of a little bit, let's say, resentment against the technology, saying like we need to be more, to communicate more one-on-one or to make some kind of neighborhood parties to be able to change the environment. But if you look at the amount of data that's available digitally, if you look at the amount of the open data that it's available in Europe, it can be, it is a next level of participation when you can have your arguments to change the city much more, much stronger, because you have much more clear data on this. Another point I would like to touch on a little bit is, of course, the gamification, or just the simulation of the planning process in a kind of very safe environment when people can be creative with the ideas they would like to present, whether to the community or to the bigger city. And again, if you look at very popular games, which are actually city building games, people really enjoy creating the urban space. If you look at the amount of people using this kind of tool, a digital tool of gaming, is really, really huge. So there is a potential in it. And I think the biggest potential is actually on the neighborhood level, to be able to combine digital tools with real impact in the city. It's the neighborhood scale that it's important. Because the bigger the city are, it's more difficult to be, active participant. Then it really enters the realms of politics, and it's a completely different way of public participation. If we are about to do more changes in the city which are quick wins, which can really solve the problems on the neighborhood, which can also give responses to big challenges like climate change, that's the scale where the most effect lies, and that's the scale people really understand in their day-to-day basis. And the last point I would like to make in defending the more digital tools or more gaming tools is people usually do not have really time to participate when when the municipality sends some kind of letter and say like, this is a project we would like you to participate. Can you fill in the form and participate, or can you come to the event and participate? People will just look at the daily agenda and say like, yeah, you know what, I would like to spend this weekend with my children and not really participate on a neighborhood level, can I just rest a little bit because I worked whole week? So in those terms, digital tools, gamifications are really have a very low threshold. You can do it everywhere, you can use it from every device. And maybe that's just a little food for thought, how to use all these tools.
Спасибо большое. Мне кажется,
Thank you so much. I think Milena has touched upon a very important issue. Why do the citizens want to participate? Why would they? Why would they spend time for that? But it's really relative for our Russian people. Well, why should we? We have municipal authorities. We have the municipal companies who are responsible for that. They should make our streets cleaner, city more beautiful. Why should we participate? But sometimes there are still active groups of people who say, we want to improve our city. I would like to ask this question Nadezhda Snegireva, the partner project Group 8. She, in practice, knows how difficult it is to speak to different groups of population. Some of them say, come on, we don't need it. But she knows how to make them active. And on the other hand, she knows how to hinder the barriers no, we cannot do it. When the local authorities say, yes, we understand you want to do it, but it is impossible, we need to change the general plan, it's too difficult. No way. This is what they say. So, Nadezhda, could you please share with us how you managed to do it in Tatarstan and how you will probably copy it and map it? Thank you so much. I would like to share with you our experience. So, our team does social involvement and involvement of people for city development for 9 years. When I just realized this figure for myself, I told myself, my God. So the Republic of Tatarstan, about 9 years ago, people said that we are crazy. They said just it's crazy. Why should we do it? But today we can see it has become part of the city agenda in many regions. Moreover, this is what our government wants us to do, and this has become successful practice in the Republic of Tatarstan. And my colleagues will support me, saying this is what we do every day. This changes the people's attitude to the city and makes them more initiative. Let me specify why we got this idea 9 years ago. We were, well, not really experts, I would say half experts, but we were active. We started to think why the city environment was, well, created inefficiently, because the initiative comes from the top and people sometimes do not know why they need it. So sometimes the solutions turn up inefficient, and sometimes, like Ekaterinburg, you probably remember this story when the local authorities wanted to construct the cathedral, the Central Park, and that turned into the conflict with people because they wanted to have the park and not the cathedral there. So let us start involving people from the very beginning, asking them what they want. So we want to create the people will like, that will change to the better the life in this very city or town or area. We want to change things together with the population and support them. It is good when all the interested parties today decide what they need to do, what they need to change. They carry on negotiations, sometimes difficult, sometimes for a long time, but the result is different. It is something everyone likes, the citizens, the businesses, the conflicts are resolved. So I've managed to participate in many projects. Sometimes we had to stop or cancel some construction because the citizens wanted a park there. It is a unique experience. For that, we use different instruments which help us to work with the city community. Let me share with you not only the positive agreement, but like the previous speakers, but negative one. So the project activation in the city of Vologda is a project like this. Probably you will use this case positively for you. Today we have problems which prohibit people to involve and to influence the projects and the life in their cities. Vologda is my home city. Who doesn't come from Moscow? Raise your hands. Yeah, oh, there is the vast majority of us. You will understand me, because developing territories in these big cities and in small towns are two different things. So historically, our city is ancient, like Moscow. It was founded at 1147, and that is why we have a lot of legacy. We have wooden, beautiful houses, but we have problems because we'll lose our legacy, because the city needs and wants to develop. There are businesses who are interested in developing this city. One of the instruments we used, and there were a lot of them, the social environment project, the festival, the Days of Architecture in Vologda. We launched that festival for 6 years. The very first one was great, but it didn't involve enough people. There were about 30 people who used to gather, discuss things, but nothing really happened. I was just a citizen there, and I thought that if we start to promote us as the city of legacy and architecture, if we promote this idea involving more citizens, we'll have more chances to highlight that this topic is really significant. So these are the methods we decided to use. The instrument we call social environment project. So number one, we need to find the value uniting everyone. Well, for us, that was identity and this wooden architecture. Number two, we needed to find out communities or people for who it could be interesting. They could be velo bikers, they can be just any groups of people. Number two, we need to have a result settling some problems, because very often people do a lot and I can see a lot of discussions, but nothing really goes on. So we decided to make 5 projects of some environmental changes, but all of them were wooden. Some people thought that all of them will be burned down, but you know, all the facilities were there for 5 years. No one ever tried to burn them down. So what problems did we try to change? Number two, this place was located next to the university. Near the university, there were no benches. Maybe it's difficult for you to imagine that. So young people would probably be standing somewhere. So we wanted to create a place where people could just sit down and discuss something, or even some teachers and professors could carry out informal lectures. Number two, issue was attraction. This is one of our little amount of pedestrian streets, and at that moment, that place was just closed. It was made of metal, and you know, there is a river there. Actually, no one ever thought about this river. So we wanted to involve people, showing the beauty of this place. So we had these temporal wooden facilities, enabling people to think of something else, so that could think of some objects. Now this place has been reconstructed, and we managed to preserve the
Yeah, another case, the Red Beach, and the place where you can access the river. We have the river in our city, but no beach. And one day we started a project. We decided to reinforce the bank with concrete. We wanted to emphasize the importance of the river, that it's good to sit on the bank, to fish, to angle, to play with the kids. We wanted to show people the importance of the river, that in older days it was part of our city life. So, and students of the architectural university played an important role, and there were some enthusiasts who helped with the designing, with building, and city administration supported the initiative. Anton Anatolovich is the person this festival would be impossible without, so they trusted in us and they gave us the chance to complete our project. So in smaller cities you are often told that we have no money, and we are reluctant to change things, but private businesses supported us. Some people helped us with wood, others supported us by inviting professional construction industry people. So it was an initiative where the government, the business, and the society united for many years. So the logics behind our project was that we studied the experience back in 2012. Back then, we only had the Gorky Park in Moscow as a modern social space. Then phases of design and fundraising followed. So some people would come there to work on Saturdays. So the project lasted for 5 years. And now the social story. So the festival is now supported by the community. They support it without myself. So actually some guys who now live in Moscow, but they used to live in Vologda, so they came back, and more and more people are attracted by the festival. But if we would like to discuss the problems, why this case didn't result to be very successful in the long run, because some facilities were destroyed. For instance, one entrepreneur decided to build a parking lot closer to a cafe, or the city administration wanted to demolish the structures as they wanted new pavement on the embankment. And this is a problem because clearly it's something very fragile as a story, and it takes time for people to organize themselves. It's very fragile to work with initiatives, and it's our pain, the embankment in our city, which looks like this, and the process is going on. But at least there was a positive effect because the community behind the project, so it remained people united, and they tried to defend their interests. So architects, guides, and people from very different areas united. They try to defend the city, protect the residents, and they try to implement projects. And there was like a wave of environment activism in other cities where people started to contribute to the city without support from anyone else. But however, today we don't have any legal context to protect residents in terms of how they can influence the city and defend their rights. We don't have specialists. City administrations lack experience, and it leads to the fact that we depend, yes, if we have a different mayor, the mayor would have different ideas about the city, and residents are in that case limited to influence on the development. So, and this is our mission, to influence the situation, so that we had some different cases, not just in Tatarstan, but also in other smaller cities. Okay, we only have 4 minutes. 2 quick questions from the audience. Quick questions to our experts, please. Yes, could you please bring the microphone to this person? Hello, I'm Vasily Vishnevsky from Yuzhno-Sakhalinsk. My question is whether we should maximize the involvement of population, of residents in the project, because once we begin a project, out of 700 people, we would have like 10 people behind the initiative, and when works would start, 10 other would join them and start shouting at them. So thanks to Milena's initiative, just in 1 day's time, we could involve 3 times more people. So my question is, do you really need to maximize involvement? And secondly, what do you do with those shouting people who like prevent you from succeeding? Yes, a question, Nadezhda. Yeah, so you were looking at me. Yeah, maybe I could answer. The question is, so it's important to offer every resident a chance. So the experience of Berlin is extraordinary for the world scale, but it's essential to keep the process transparent for everyone to be involved. But you should be responsible just to avoid other people's coming and shouting and obliging you as the project lead to be responsible. So we try to shape a team which would be legitimate, which would represent interests from different stakeholders, and we all feel the responsibility for the future of the project, to the situation when we have to restart the project if anything changes in the government. So transparent processes are really important. This is my advice to you. Yes, please, another question. Hello, I'm Dmitry Razumovsky from Kaluga. Who do you think should be the initiator of involving people, and what should be the first step like? As for initiating the process, it's good that people would demonstrate their own initiative when they would understand how they can make it come true. But it is a project developed by business or by city administration, by a municipality or a region, then you have no limitations. Any actor, any person can initiate the process. But how we begin? So first of all, we need to build up a good information and communication strategy about the project and how it can be included. Thank you, dear colleagues. I believe we can continue our discussion informally as part of the forum. Thanks for visiting our session and good luck at the forum.